Golden Narrative family, we just hit 5,000 subscribers. I started this channel believing that powerful stories change lives, and you proved me right. Thank you for making this dream our reality. Let's take a moment to thank God for bringing us together, for blessing this community, and for every story that's touched a heart. May He continue to guide our journey and use these narratives to spread love and hope. This is just the beginning. We're building something incredible together. If you're new here, click on that subscribe button and join our golden family so you never miss out on this beautiful narrative. Now let's dive into today's story. The boardroom smelled like power, leather chairs, polished mahogany, and cologne that whispered wealth. It was the kind of room where empires were built and lives were changed with the stroke of a pen. Amara Cole adjusted her blazer, the fabric crisp against her skin. She tapped her pen against the folder in her lap, a nervous habit she'd never quite shaken, though everything else about her screamed confidence. She wasn't new to rooms like this, but she was tired of being the only one in them who looked like her. The mahogany doors opened with a whisper and he walked in. Damon Cross moved like gravity bent around him, like the building itself had been constructed just to frame his entrance. His suit was sharp enough to cut glass, his jaw sharper. When he looked at her, it was with the casual indifference of a man who had never been told no. "Miss Cole," he said, settling into the chair across from her. His voice was smooth, cultured, and dangerous. "Mr. Cross." She kept her tone even, professional. Inside, her pulse quickened, not from attraction, but from the electric anticipation of battle. "You're here about the compliance contract." "Yes." She opened her folder, her movements deliberate. "I've reviewed your firm's policies extensively. There are serious gaps in your diversity initiatives that need immediate." He held up a hand and she stopped. Not because she had to, but because the gesture was so casually dismissive it took her breath away. Then he smiled. It wasn't warm. It wasn't kind. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted prey. "Let me stop you right there, Miss Cole." He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "I don't hire black women. This company isn't built for you." The words landed in the silence like stones dropping into still water. The other executives, 3 white men in identical suits, suddenly found their tablets fascinating. The air itself seemed to crystallize around the declaration. But Amara didn't flinch. She closed her folder with deliberate slowness, the sound sharp in the suffocating quiet. When she stood, it was with the grace of a queen rising from her throne. "You're right," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like silk over steel. Damon blinked. He had expected anger, tears, perhaps a threat of legal action. He had not expected agreement. "I'm sorry," he said, and for the first time in the conversation he sounded uncertain. Amara stepped closer to the table, her hands flat against the polished surface. When she leaned forward, her voice dropped to something intimate and deadly. "You're right," she repeated. "You don't hire black women. But you will remember me." Something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps even intrigue. "I doubt it." The smile that curved her lips was nothing like his had been. Where his was cold, hers was fire. Where his was dismissive, hers was promise. "I don't care if you doubt me," she said, each word precise as a surgeon's cut. "I care that when your empire crumbles, and it will crumble, you'll know exactly whose face you should have taken seriously." She straightened, smoothed her blazer, and picked up her purse. The executives were still staring at their screens, but their shoulders were tense with the weight of witnessing something that would be whispered about in corporate hallways for years to come. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," she said, including them all in her gaze. "Mr. Cross." She walked to the door, each step measured, powerful. Her hand was on the handle when his voice stopped her. "Miss Cole." She paused but didn't turn around. "I meant what I said." "So did I." The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like thunder. In the hallway, Amara's phone buzzed immediately. Tasha's name flashed on the screen. "Girl," came her best friend's voice before Amara even said hello. "Please tell me you recorded that conversation because the universe needs receipts." Despite everything, Amara felt her lips twitch. "He said it, Tasha." "The whole sentence?" "The whole damn sentence." There was a pause, then Tasha's voice came back loaded with righteous fury and barely contained laughter. Well. Looks like Mr. Ice King just picked a fight with a queen. Baby, he has no idea what's coming for him." As Amara walked toward the elevator, something settled in her chest. Not anger, not hurt, but something far more dangerous. Determination. Behind the closed boardroom doors, Damon sat alone, the executives having scattered like leaves in a storm. He stared at the chair where she had sat, at the space where she had stood when she promised his downfall. And for the first time in his carefully constructed life, Damon Cross felt something that might have been fear. Or anticipation. He couldn't tell the difference anymore. 20 minutes later, Amara sat in her car in the parking garage, hands steady on the steering wheel. The engine was off, but she hadn't moved. She was breathing deeply, letting the adrenaline settle, letting her mind catch up with what had just happened. Her phone rang again. Tasha, of course. You still in that building? Tasha's voice was gentler now, concerned. Parking garage. Good. Don't go back up there and burn it down. We need you out of prison for what comes next. Amara laughed, surprising herself. What comes next? Revenge, baby. But the kind that builds empires while it destroys his. The drive to her apartment gave Amara time to think, to plan. By the time she pulled into her complex, the shock had transformed into something sharper, more focused. She wasn't a victim of Damon Cross's prejudice. She was a weapon he had just unwittingly sharpened. Her apartment wasn't just a home, it was mission control. Tasha arrived within the hour, arms loaded with groceries and righteous indignation. You alive? She called, kicking the door shut behind her. Barely. Good. I brought vitamins. Tasha unpacked mango smoothies and plantain chips with the efficiency of someone who had done this before. Vitamin C protects your skin from the ashiness of white male arrogance. Amara snorted, accepting the smoothie. You're ridiculous. And you're too serious. Now tell me exactly what that fool said word for word. As Amara recounted the meeting, Tasha's expressions shifted from amusement to horror to pure fury. The audacity jumped out and did a whole performance. Tasha slammed her smoothie down. Lord, why didn't you make me 6 foot tall and bulletproof? I'd have body slammed him through that mahogany table. That's exactly why you weren't invited. Good point. Tasha settled cross-legged on the couch, studying her best friend. So what now? Please tell me we're not just gonna let this slide. Amara moved to her vision board, running her fingers over the quotes that had sustained her through law school, through every closed door and sideways glance. We don't let it slide, she said quietly. We let it build. Across town, Damon Cross stood in his corner office, pretending to review quarterly reports. But his mind kept drifting to coffee-colored eyes and a voice that had cut through his certainty like warm butter. You will remember me. He shook his head, annoyed with himself. He had dismissed thousands of people over the years. Vendors, employees, competitors. Why was this one different? Because she hadn't begged. She hadn't argued. She had simply promised. And Damon had built his empire on understanding the difference between empty threats and genuine promises. His assistant knocked. Sir? The compliance reports you requested. Leave them on the desk. As the door closed, Damon found himself wondering what Amara Cole would have found in those reports. What gaps would her sharp mind have identified? What changes would she have demanded? He pushed the thought away. It didn't matter. The meeting was over, the contract would go to someone else, and Amara Cole would become just another footnote in his company's history. But her words echoed in the silence. When your empire crumbles, you'll know exactly whose face you should have taken seriously. A week passed. Amara threw herself into her other clients, building cases and changing policies one contract at a time. But every morning she looked at her vision board and remembered Damon's smug smile. Tasha burst through her door on Friday morning, phone in hand, grinning like Christmas morning. The universe is petty, and I am here for every single second of it. Amara looked up from her laptop, eyebrow raised. What? Tasha shoved the phone screen toward her. The headline made Amara's breath catch. Cross Enterprises announces Diversity Reform Challenge, $50 million contract up for grabs. Keep reading, Tasha urged, practically vibrating with excitement. Amara scrolled down, her eyes widening with each paragraph. Cross Enterprises was opening their doors to outside consultants, looking for innovative frameworks to transform their workplace culture. The winning proposal would land a multi-million-dollar contract and complete authority to implement company-wide changes. The irony tastes like fried plantain and sweet justice, Tasha said, settling beside her friend. Girl, this is your moment. Amara stared at the announcement, her mind racing. The same company that had rejected her for her skin color was now begging for exactly what she offered. Transformation, inclusion, cultural change. It could be a trap, she said slowly. Could be. Or it could be destiny wearing work clothes. Amara moved to her vision board again, but this time her smile was different. Not bitter, not angry, but dangerous in its quiet confidence. You know what? She said, turning back to Tasha. Let's make it personal. Meanwhile, at Cross Enterprises, Damon scrolled through the list of applicants on his computer screen. The response had been overwhelming, hundreds of consultants, firms, and independent contractors all vying for the contract. His pen froze over one name. Amara Cole. For a moment the office seemed to tilt. He read the name again, certain he was mistaken. But there it was, in black and white, accompanied by a proposal summary that made his pulse quicken despite himself. Cultural transformation through authentic leadership. A framework for sustainable inclusion. Damon leaned back in his chair, a laugh escaping before he could stop it. Not amusement, recognition. She had done exactly what she promised. She wasn't begging for a seat at his table. She was building her own. Sir? His assistant peered around the door. Everything all right? Everything's. Damon paused, still staring at the screen. Everything's about to get interesting. As he closed the laptop, one thought echoed in his mind. For the first time in years, Damon Cross felt something that might have been anticipation. Or dread. He still couldn't tell the difference. That evening, Amara's apartment had transformed into war room headquarters. I can't just use numbers, she muttered, pacing between stacks of research. They need stories. They need to see faces, not statistics. Tasha sprawled across the couch, painting her nails a defiant shade of gold. But remember, beauty sleep exists. Your under-eye bags are starting to look designer. Gucci? More like Walmart clearance, honey? They dissolved into laughter, the sound cutting through the tension that had been building all week. Seriously though, Tasha said, waving her nails dry. You're going to destroy him. Not because you hate him, but because you're just that damn good. Amara paused in her pacing, looking at her reflection in the dark window. What if this backfires? What if he finds a way to humiliate me publicly? Then we burn his whole company down with screenshots and social media. Tasha's voice was matter of fact. But that's not going to happen. You know why? Why? Because that man underestimated you once. He's not stupid enough to do it twice. Drop a crown emoji if you're ready to see Amara show Damon exactly what he rejected. Monday morning arrived with the kind of determination that changes everything. Amara sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, the diversity challenge guidelines spread before her like a map to victory. All right, Mr. Cross, she murmured, fingers poised over the keyboard. You want transformation? Let me show you what revolution looks like. The proposal that began taking shape wasn't just professional, it was surgical. Every sentence cut away at the foundations of companies like Cross Enterprises. Every recommendation targeted the exact mentalities that had created men like Damon. But as she wrote, something unexpected happened. She found herself thinking not just about destroying him, but about actually changing him. Dangerous territory, she whispered to herself. 3 floors of Cross Enterprises hummed with the usual Monday morning energy, but Damon's office felt different. Quieter. More focused. He had been reading applications since dawn, but his eyes kept returning to one file. Amara Cole's proposal wasn't the longest, wasn't the flashiest, but it was the most unsettling. She wrote like someone who understood power, not how to beg for it but how to redistribute it. Mr. Cross. His assistant's voice cut through his concentration. What is it, Patricia? The preliminary review committee wants to meet about the applications. Should I schedule? No. The word came out sharper than he intended. I'll review them personally. All of them. Patricia blinked. In 15 years, she had never known Damon to personally review vendor applications. Sir, there are over 300 submissions. Then I'd better get started. As the door closed, Damon opened Amara's file again. Her proposal began with a question that made his chest tighten. What if the problem isn't that your company lacks diversity, but that your leadership lacks the courage to be transformed by it? He read the sentence 3 times before moving on. Amara's apartment had officially become mission control. Charts covered the walls, mapping everything from Cross Enterprises' board composition to their hiring patterns over the past 5 years. Tasha sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting through printed articles while munching plantain chips. Your research game is scary, Tasha commented, holding up a photo of Damon from a business magazine. You know this man's coffee order by now. I know his company's weaknesses, Amara corrected, not looking up from her laptop. That's different. And what about his personal weaknesses? Amara's fingers paused over the keys. I'm not interested in anything personal. Sure you're not. Tasha's grin was knowing. That's why you've been staring at his Harvard Business Review interview for 20 minutes. Amara closed the tab quickly. I was reading about his leadership philosophy. Right. His leadership philosophy. which happens to be attached to a face that could launch 1,000 corporate takeovers. Tasha. I'm just saying even revenge can have good cheekbones. Despite herself, Amara laughed. But as she returned to her proposal, she couldn't shake Tasha's words. She had been studying Damon Cross for days now. His interviews, his company's history, the way he spoke about power and control. And somewhere in all that research she had started seeing glimpses of something else. Not excuses for his behavior, but cracks in his armor that suggested he might be more complex than the man who had dismissed her so casually. Focus, she told herself. This is business. But her heart whispered back, is it? Meanwhile, Damon was conducting research of his own. He told himself it was professional curiosity as he pulled up Amara's website, her LinkedIn profile, articles she had written for Harvard Law Review. But as he read her words, passionate, intelligent, uncompromising, something shifted inside him. She wasn't just another consultant trying to win a contract. She was a force of nature who happened to work in corporate compliance. Her headshot gazed back at him from the computer screen. Professional, confident, but there was something in her eyes that spoke of depths he hadn't noticed in their brief meeting. A kind of fire that burned steady rather than wild. What are you doing, Cross? He muttered to himself. His office door opened without a knock, something only one person in the building dared to do. Working late again? Marcus, his VP of operations, settled into the chair across from Damon's desk. Patricia mentioned you're personally reviewing vendor applications. That's not like you. Damon minimized Amara's profile. The diversity initiative is important. I want to make sure we choose the right consultant. Right? Marcus's tone suggested he wasn't buying it. This wouldn't have anything to do with that Cole woman who stormed out of here last week, would it? She didn't storm. She made an exit. There's a difference? Everything she does seems to have a difference. The admission hung in the air between them. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Interesting. It's not interesting. It's business. If you say so. Marcus stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I looked her up after she left. Her track record is impressive. Companies that hire her see real change, not just paperwork compliance. After Marcus left, Damon sat alone with his thoughts and Amara's minimized profile. With a click, her face filled his screen again. Real change, not just paperwork compliance. Maybe that's exactly what Cross Enterprises needed. Maybe that's exactly what he needed. 2 days later, Amara submitted her proposal. The moment she pressed send, her phone rang. It's done, she told Tasha without preamble. How do you feel? Amara considered the question. Like I just lit a match in a room full of gasoline. Good. Let that man burn in the best possible way. But as Amara stared at her computer screen, she realized something that surprised her. She didn't want to watch Damon Cross burn. She wanted to watch him transform. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like the most dangerous kind of hope. At Cross Enterprises, notification chimes echoed through Damon's computer as final proposals arrived. 347 submissions, from international firms to solo consultants, all vying for the same prize. But when Amara Cole's proposal appeared in his inbox, everything else became background noise. Her executive summary began simply. You asked for transformation. I'm offering resurrection. Damon leaned back in his chair, a smile tugging at his lips despite everything. She had done it again, surprised him, challenged him, made him think beyond the boundaries of his own expectations. For the first time since announcing the diversity challenge, Damon Cross felt something that might have been excitement. This was going to be far more interesting than he had imagined. The Meridian Grand Ballroom glittered like a constellation brought to earth. Crystal chandeliers cast prisms of light across marble floors, while champagne towers sparkled among arrangements of white orchids and gold accents. It was the kind of event where million-dollar deals were made over small talk and charity became a competitive sport. Amara stood before her full-length mirror, smoothing the midnight blue silk that hugged her curves like liquid starlight. The dress had been an investment, one that Tasha had insisted was necessary. You're not just attending, Tasha had said while forcing her to try it on. You're making a statement. Now, as Amara fastened diamond earrings that caught the light with every movement, she understood what that statement was. I belong in any room I choose to enter. Her phone buzzed. Tasha's face appeared on the screen, grinning from her own bathroom mirror. Please tell me you're wearing the dress that makes grown men forget their own names. I'm wearing the dress. Good. Tonight, you're not just Amara Cole, compliance consultant. Tonight, you're Amara Cole, force of nature. Make that man remember why he should have taken you seriously the first time. Across the city, Damon adjusted his black tie for the third time. The charity gala was an annual obligation. Smile, write checks, network with the same circle of wealth and influence he'd known his entire life. Usually, these events bored him to distraction. Tonight felt different. Sir? His driver appeared at the penthouse door. The car is ready. Thank you, James. Damon grabbed his jacket, then paused at his hallway mirror. For reasons he couldn't name, he found himself wondering if she would be there. The thought should have been absurd. Why would a compliance consultant attend the city's most exclusive charity gala? But Amara Cole had already proven she was full of surprises. The ballroom buzzed with the energy of 300 of the city's most powerful people. Amara moved through the crowd with practiced grace, accepting champagne from passing servers and engaging in conversations that danced around business without ever quite landing there. She was discussing urban development initiatives with the mayor's wife when the atmosphere shifted. A ripple of attention moved through the room like wind through wheat, and she knew without turning that Damon Cross had arrived. "Excuse me," she murmured to her conversation partner, then turned to watch his entrance. He moved through the crowd like gravity pulling satellites into orbit. Handshakes, brief conversations, that practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. But when his gaze swept the room and landed on her, everything stopped. The champagne in her hand might as well have turned to smoke. The conversations around her faded to white noise. For a moment that stretched like eternity, they simply looked at each other across the glittering ballroom. Then he started walking toward her. "Miss Cole." His voice was exactly as she remembered, smooth, controlled, dangerous. "Mr. Cross." She lifted her champagne in a mock toast. "I didn't expect to see you mingling with the charitable tonight. That makes two of us." His eyes traveled over her dress with an appreciation he didn't bother to hide. "Though I have to say, you clean up well for a compliance consultant." "Careful," she said, sipping her champagne. That almost sounded like a compliment. Maybe it was. The admission surprised them both. For a moment, something flickered between them. Not hostility, not quite attraction, but recognition of a worthy opponent. "Enjoying the evening?" he asked, moving closer. Close enough that she caught his cologne, expensive and understated. "It's illuminating. Amazing how charity brings out everyone's best face." "And what face are you wearing tonight, Miss Cole?" She met his gaze directly. "The one that remembers exactly what you said in that boardroom." Instead of the defensive response she expected, Damon's lips curved into something that might have been genuine amusement. "Good," he said quietly. "I was hoping you hadn't forgotten." Before she could respond, a whirlwind in sequined gold materialized beside them. Well, Tasha appeared with perfect timing, champagne flute in hand and mischief in her eyes. "If it isn't Mr. I don't hire black women himself." Amara closed her eyes briefly. "Tasha." "Oh, don't worry, girl. I'm being good." Tasha extended her hand to Damon with mock formality. "Tasha Williams. Best friend, voice of reason, and occasional bodyguard." To his credit, Damon shook her hand without hesitation. "Damon Cross. And I probably deserved that introduction." "Probably?" Tasha's eyebrows shot up. "Honey, you definitely deserved it. But I'll give you points for not running away." "I don't run," Damon said, his eyes never leaving Amara's face. "No," Amara said softly, "you just dismiss people who threaten your comfortable world." The words should have stung. Instead, Damon stepped closer. "Maybe I'm tired of comfort." The ballroom seemed to fall away around them. Tasha glanced between her best friend and the man who had insulted her, reading the tension crackling in the air between them. "Well," she said with exaggerated brightness, "this is either the beginning of the greatest comeback story ever told, or I'm about to witness a murder. Either way, I need more champagne." She disappeared back into the crowd, leaving Amara and Damon alone in a bubble of charged silence. "Your friend doesn't trust me," Damon observed. "She's protective. And smart enough to judge people by their actions, not their intentions. What would it take to change her mind? The same thing it would take to change mine." Amara's voice was steady, but something in her chest fluttered traitorously. "Actually proving you're different. And how would I do that?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibilities neither was ready to name. "I suppose we'll find out," she said finally. The orchestra began playing and couples drifted toward the dance floor. Damon watched them for a moment, then extended his hand. "Dance with me." "I don't think that's a good idea." "Probably not." His smile was different now, not practiced, not calculated, but genuinely uncertain. "Dance with me anyway." Against every instinct screaming warnings, Amara placed her hand in his. His touch was warm, steady as he led her onto the dance floor. When his other hand settled at her waist, she felt the strength in his fingers, the careful control that spoke of a man who was used to handling valuable things. "You're full of surprises," he said as they began to move to the music. "How so?" "You could have refused to dance. Could have walked away when you saw me coming. But you didn't. Maybe I wanted to see what you'd do." "And what am I doing?" She looked up at him, noting the way the ballroom lights caught the gold flecks in his brown eyes. "Something that doesn't match the man who dismissed me." Maybe that man was an idiot. The admission was so quiet she almost missed it. But the sincerity in his voice, the way his hand tightened slightly at her waist, told her she had heard correctly. "Maybe," she agreed softly. They danced in silence for a moment, the space between them electric with unspoken possibilities. Other couples moved around them, but Amara was hyper-aware of only Damon. The way he moved, the warmth of his hand, the intensity of his focus on her face. "I read your proposal," he said suddenly. Her pulse quickened. "And?" "It was unexpected." "Good unexpected or bad unexpected?" His laugh was surprised, genuine. "Terrifying, unexpected. You don't just want to change policies, do you? You want to change minds. Is that a problem?" "It should be." He spun her gently, then pulled her back into his arms. "But I find myself curious about what my mind would look like changed by you." The words sent heat racing through her veins. This was dangerous territory, the space between professional interest and personal attraction, between judgment and forgiveness. "Curiosity can be expensive," she warned. "I'm beginning to think some things are worth the cost." When the song ended, they stood for a moment longer than necessary, hands still linked, eyes still locked. Around them, the party continued, but they remained in their bubble of possibility and peril. "I should go," Amara said finally. "Should you?" "Yes." But she didn't move. "Amara." Her name on his lips sounded different than it had in the boardroom. Softer. More careful. "Whatever happens with the diversity challenge, I want you to know." "What?" "You were right. In the boardroom. I will remember you." This time the words weren't a dismissal. They were a promise. As she walked away, Damon watched her move through the crowd like a queen among courtiers. He had come to the gala expecting a predictable evening of networking and obligation. Instead, he had found himself dancing with the woman who might just save his company. Or destroy it completely. Coffee steam curled between them like secrets as Amara and Tasha sat in their favorite corner booth at Café Luna. 3 days had passed since the gala, but the memory of Damon's hands at her waist still made Amara's pulse quicken in unguarded moments. "So," Tasha said, stirring sugar into her latte with theatrical slowness, "are we going to talk about what happened on that dance floor, or are we going to pretend you didn't look at that man like he was dessert?" "Nothing happened." Amara's voice was carefully neutral. "We danced. We talked. I left. Well, and that little moment where you forgot to breathe when he said your name? Didn't happen. Right?" Tasha's grin was wicked. "That's why you've checked your phone 17 times since we sat down, waiting for news about the challenge results." Amara's phone chose that exact moment to buzz. Both women froze. Cross Enterprises, Amara read from the caller ID, her heart doing something complicated behind her ribs. "Answer it," Tasha whispered, leaning forward like she was watching the climax of her favorite movie. "Miss Cole?" The voice wasn't Damon's, it was crisp, professional, female. "This is Patricia Wells, Mr. Cross's assistant. Could you hold for Mr. Cross, please?" Before Amara could respond, the line clicked to hold music. Tasha was practically vibrating with anticipation. "Miss Cole." Damon's voice filled her ear, and despite herself, Amara felt her stomach flutter. "Congratulations. You've been selected as one of our final 5 presenters. Professional. Keep it professional." "Thank you. When will the presentations take place?" "Thursday. 10 a.m. You'll have 30 minutes to present your proposal to our board and external panel of judges." "I'll be there." "I'm looking forward to it." There was something in his voice, warmth, anticipation, something that made her wonder if he was thinking about their dance too. "Miss Cole?" "Yes." "Good luck." The line went dead. Tasha was staring at her with eyes wide as saucers. "Girl, what did he say?" "I'm in the final 5. Tasha's whoop of excitement drew stares from every other customer in the cafe. "My best friend is about to serve an entire boardroom the performance of a lifetime." But as they celebrated with raised coffee cups and planning sessions, Amara couldn't shake the memory of how Damon had said good luck. Like he actually meant it. Meanwhile, at Cross Enterprises, Damon sat in his office reviewing the list of final presenters. 5 names, 5 different approaches to transformation, 5 chances to reshape his company's future. But if he was honest with himself, there was only one name that mattered. Interesting choices, Marcus said, settling into the chair across from Damon's desk. Though I have to ask, Cole's proposal is brilliant, but bringing her in front of the board after what happened. What happened was I made a mistake. The words came out sharper than Damon intended. One I intend to correct. Marcus studied his friend's face. This isn't just about business anymore, is it? Everything is business. Sure it is. That's why you've read her proposal 6 times and keep her headshot open on your desktop. Damon minimized Amara's photo with more force than necessary. The presentations are Thursday. I suggest we focus on that. But after Marcus left, Damon found himself opening her file again. Not the proposal this time, the photo. The woman looking back at him was confident, intelligent, beautiful in a way that made his chest tighten with something he wasn't ready to name. Thursday morning arrived with the weight of destiny. The Cross Enterprises conference room had been transformed into a presentation theater, complete with cameras, projectors, and a panel of judges that read like a who's who of corporate America. Amara sat in the waiting area with the other 4 finalists, her presentation materials organized in her lap. She wore a tailored white suit that made her skin glow like warm honey, armor disguised as elegance. Through the glass doors, she could see Damon in the conference room, speaking quietly with board members. When their eyes met across the space, he nodded, professional acknowledgement with an undercurrent of something deeper. Miss Cole? Patricia appeared beside her. You're up. The conference room fell silent as Amara entered. 20 faces turned toward her. Board members, external judges, corporate executives who had built empires on maintaining the status quo. At the head of the table sat Damon, his expression carefully neutral. Good morning, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. Thank you for this opportunity. She moved to the front of the room without notes, without slides, with nothing but the fire that had been burning in her chest since that day in the boardroom. Before we discuss frameworks and implementation strategies, she began, I want to tell you about Sarah. The room shifted slightly. They had been expecting charts and statistics, not stories. Sarah is a brilliant engineer. Top of her class at MIT, patents in sustainable energy, recommendations from Nobel laureates. When she interviewed at your competitor last month, do you know what the hiring manager told her? Silence. He said she was impressive but represented too much of a risk. Amara's voice remained steady, but power thrummed beneath every word. Not because of her work, but because clients might not be comfortable with a young black woman leading their projects. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Damon's hands were perfectly still on the table, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. That's the world we're living in, Amara continued. Where brilliance comes second to comfort. Where innovation takes a backseat to familiarity. Where companies like this one miss out on the Sarahs of the world because leaders mistake conformity for competence. She moved closer to the table, her presence commanding every eye in the room. You asked for transformation frameworks. But transformation isn't a framework, it's a revolution. It's choosing courage over comfort, growth over stagnation, truth over tradition. The room was absolutely silent now. What I'm offering you isn't compliance. It's culture change. Because companies don't rise when they erase people. They rise when they embrace them. She gestured toward the windows overlooking the city. Out there are thousands of brilliant minds being dismissed, overlooked, underestimated, just like Sarah. Just like me when I walked into your boardroom 2 weeks ago. The question isn't whether you can afford to hire them. Her eyes found Damon's across the room. The question is whether you can afford not to. The applause started slowly, one person then another, then a crescendo that filled the room. Several board members were on their feet. Judge after judge nodded with approval. But Amara only cared about one reaction. Damon's hands had moved to join the applause, his eyes locked on hers with something that looked like pride. Or something deeper. 3 hours later, the results were announced. Meridian Consulting had won first place with their comprehensive integration model. Amara placed second. She accepted the news with grace, shook hands with the winners, smiled for the cameras. But disappointment sat heavy in her chest despite the accolades and job offers that followed her presentation. As the conference room emptied, she found herself alone, packing up materials that suddenly felt like evidence of failure. You should have won. She turned to find Damon standing in the doorway, tie loosened, expression unreadable. Second place isn't bad, she replied, forcing lightness into her voice. It's not justice. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. Your presentation was the only one that understood what transformation actually means. But not the one your board chose. My board chose safety. You offered revolution. He moved closer, and she caught that hint of expensive cologne that had distracted her during their dance. Those are very different things. And which do you prefer? The question hung between them, loaded with meanings that had nothing to do with business presentations. 3 weeks ago, I would have said safety. His voice was quiet, almost uncertain. But lately, I find myself thinking revolution might be worth the risk. Amara's breath caught. They were standing too close now, the space between them electric with possibility and danger. Careful, Mr. Cross, she said softly. Revolution has a way of changing everything you think you know about yourself. Maybe that's exactly what I need. The words were barely above a whisper, but they echoed in the space between them like a promise. Amara. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer, like a question, like an admission he wasn't ready to make. I should go, she said, but she didn't move. Should you? It was the same question he had asked at the gala, but this time the weight behind it was different. Heavier. More dangerous. Yes, she whispered, but her feet remained rooted to the spot. He reached out slowly, his fingers almost touching her cheek before he stopped himself. I keep trying to figure out what you did to me, he said. What I did to you. Made me see. Made me question everything I thought I knew about power, about success, about... He paused, struggling with words that seemed too big for the space between them. About what? About what matters. The admission hung in the air like smoke, impossible to take back. Finally, Amara stepped away, breaking whatever spell had been weaving itself around them. Good luck with your transformation, Mr. Cross, she said, gathering her materials with hands that weren't quite steady. I hope you find what you're looking for. As she reached the door, his voice stopped her. What if what I'm looking for is you? She paused, her hand on the door handle, heart hammering against her ribs. Then you better make sure you're worth finding. The knock on Amara's office door came at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, 3 days after the presentation results. She looked up from the contract she was reviewing, surprised to find anyone else in the building so late. We're closed, she called out, not moving from her desk. I know. Damon's voice stopped her heart mid-beat. She looked toward the glass door where his silhouette stood backlit by the hallway lighting. You shouldn't be here, she said, not opening the door. Probably not. The admission was so honest, so devoid of his usual corporate polish, that curiosity won over caution. She unlocked the door and stepped back. He looked different. His tie was gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms, his hair mussed like he'd been running his fingers through it. This wasn't CEO Damon Cross. This was just Damon, uncertain and almost vulnerable. How did you get past building security? I own this building. Right. Of course he did. What do you want? The question came out harsher than she intended, but she was tired of trying to decode his mixed signals. He stepped into her office, taking in the organized chaos of her late-night work session. Case files scattered across her desk, coffee cups in various stages of abandonment, her jacket hung over her chair. Do you hate me? He asked suddenly. The question was so unexpected, so quietly desperate, that it derailed every prepared response she had. What? I need to know if you hate me. Because if you do, I'll leave. I'll stop calling, stop showing up, stop. He gestured helplessly around her office. Stop whatever this is. Amara studied his face, noting the exhaustion around his eyes, the way his usual confidence had cracked to reveal something raw underneath. Why would you ask that? Because I deserve it. His laugh was hollow. I looked at your skin and decided you weren't worthy of my company. I dismissed you like you were nothing. If you hate me for that, I understand. But I don't want you to. And I've never cared whether someone hated me before. The honesty in his voice made something shift in her chest. She moved to her small kitchenette, needing distance and distraction. Coffee? She asked. It's almost 10 p.m. I don't sleep much anyway. She started a fresh pot, the familiar ritual giving her hands something to do while her mind processed his presence. To answer your question, no, I don't hate you. Relief flickered across his features. Why not? Because hate requires energy I don't waste on people who don't matter. But I do matter? She turned to face him, leaning against the counter. You matter to me more than you should. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Amara? Don't? She held up a hand. Whatever you're about to say, don't. We both know this is complicated. Everything worth having is complicated. Is that what you think this is? Something worth having? The coffee maker gurgled in the silence as Damon struggled with an answer that seemed to require more courage than boardroom negotiations ever had. I think, he said finally, that you've made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. About what I want. About what kind of man I want to be. And what kind is that? The kind who's worthy of your respect. The simple honesty of it nearly undid her. She poured 2 cups of coffee, using the task to hide the tremor in her hands. Here. She handed him a mug, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The touch was electric, brief, dangerous. Thank you. They stood in her small office, drinking coffee that was too strong and sharing a silence that was somehow more intimate than conversation. Why are you really here? She asked finally. Because I can't stop thinking about what you said. About being worth finding. And? I want to try. To be worth it, I mean. He set down his coffee and moved closer. But I don't know how. That's not my job to teach you. No, he agreed. But maybe you could let me try to figure it out. The request was so tentative, so unlike the commanding man who had dismissed her weeks ago, that Amara felt her resolve wavering. This is dangerous, she whispered. The best things usually are. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Tasha. Emergency. My stove died and I'm supposed to cook for my book club tomorrow. Can I commandeer your kitchen? Amara glanced at the message, then at Damon standing in her office looking like he was waiting for her to decide his fate. Rain check on the life-changing conversation, she said, showing him the text. My best friend needs rescue, and when Tasha needs rescue, everyone drops everything. Of course. But disappointment flickered across his face as he reached for his jacket. Unless. The words were out before she could stop them. Do you cook? I order from the best restaurants in the city. That's not cooking. A dangerous idea was taking shape in her mind. Come with me. Help me help Tasha. Consider it part of your transformation education. His eyebrows rose. You want me to meet your best friend? The one who called me out at the gala? I want to see if you can handle vegetables without calling your assistant. Challenge accepted. An hour later, Amara's apartment had become a chaos of chopped vegetables, simmering pots, and laughter that echoed off the kitchen walls. Tasha had taken one look at Damon fumbling with a carrot and appointed herself director of entertainment. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced to her phone camera, observe the rare billionaire in his natural habitat, completely helpless in the presence of root vegetables. Damon held up a mangled piece of celery. I think I'm doing this wrong. You think? Amara tried to keep her voice stern, but laughter kept breaking through. You're supposed to dice it, not massacre it. Here, let me show you. She moved behind him, her hands covering his on the knife. Like this. Small, even cuts. The moment their bodies pressed together, the kitchen seemed to shrink around them. Amara was acutely aware of his warmth against her back, the way his breathing changed when she guided his hands, the subtle tension in his shoulders. Better? She asked, her voice softer than she intended. Much. But he wasn't looking at the vegetables. Oh my God, y'all, Tasha stage whispered to her camera. The sexual tension in this kitchen could power the building. Tasha. Amara jumped away from Damon, heat flooding her cheeks. What? I'm just saying what we're all thinking. She grinned at Damon. Right, billionaire boy? To his credit, Damon didn't deny it. Your friend has excellent observational skills. And you have excellent deflection skills. Tasha pointed her wooden spoon at him. But can you handle the real question? Which is? What are your intentions with my best friend? The kitchen fell silent except for the bubbling of sauce on the stove. Amara opened her mouth to deflect, but Damon's response stopped her. To prove I'm not the man who dismissed her, he said quietly. To prove I can be the man who deserves her. Tasha's expression shifted from playful to serious as she studied his face. That's a good answer, she said finally. But answers are easy. Actions are harder. I'm learning that. Good. She turned back to the stove. Now less talking, more cooking. These vegetables aren't going to prepare themselves. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of cooking lessons, terrible jokes, and moments of connection that felt both inevitable and terrifying. Damon proved surprisingly teachable, though his technique remained questionable. You're getting better, Amara said as he successfully diced an onion without injury. Good teacher. Or desperate student. Maybe both. After Tasha left with enough food to feed her book club twice over, Amara and Damon found themselves alone in her kitchen, surrounded by the comfortable mess of their cooking adventure. "I should go," he said, but made no move toward the door. "You should," she agreed, not stepping away from where they stood by the sink. "Your friend likes me. Tasha likes anyone who can make me laugh." "Do I make you laugh?" She considered the question, thinking about the evening, his bewildered expression when faced with cooking basics, the way he gamely accepted Tasha's teasing, the moment of pure joy when he'd successfully flipped a pancake without it landing on the floor. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Good." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers brushed a strand of hair away from her face. "I like your laugh, Damon. I know this is complicated. I know I have no right to ask for anything from you. But spending tonight here with you and your friend, cooking dinner like normal people?" He paused, struggling with words. "It felt like the first real thing I've done in years." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm tired of being who everyone expects me to be. And when I'm with you, I remember who I might be instead." The confession hung between them, vulnerable and honest. Amara felt her carefully constructed walls wavering. "This is dangerous," she repeated, but her voice had lost its conviction. "The best things usually are," he said again, echoing his earlier words. This time, when he leaned closer, she didn't pull away. Their lips met in a kiss that was tentative at first, then deeper as she responded. It lasted only a moment, brief, electric, impossible to take back. When they separated, both were breathing unsteadily. "Dangerous," she whispered. "Addictive," he replied, his forehead resting against hers. They stood like that for a long moment, balanced on the edge of something that would change everything. "I should really go," he said finally. "Yes, you should." But it was another 10 minutes before he actually left, and another hour before Amara stopped touching her lips and remembering the way he had tasted like possibility. The changes started small. Amara noticed them first at a community panel on workplace equity where Damon appeared as a last-minute addition to the speaker lineup. She had been invited to discuss her consulting work when she spotted him in the green room, looking distinctly uncomfortable in a setting that was worlds away from corporate boardrooms. "Fancy seeing you here," she said, accepting coffee from the volunteer coordinator. "I could say the same." He straightened his tie, a nervous habit she was beginning to recognize. "Though I suspect you actually belong here, and I'm just trying to figure out how not to embarrass myself." "Since when do you care about embarrassing yourself?" "Since I met someone whose opinion of me matters more than my comfort zone." The admission caught her off guard, as his honesty always did. Before she could respond, they were called to take their places on stage. But it was during the panel that Amara truly saw the depth of his transformation beginning. When a young Latina entrepreneur asked about breaking into corporate partnerships, Damon didn't deliver his usual polished non-answers. Instead, he leaned forward and said, "The system is designed to make you prove yourself twice as hard for half the recognition. That's wrong, it's inefficient, and it's exactly what companies like mine need to change." The audience stirred with surprise. This wasn't the sanitized corporate speak they expected from a CEO. "What would you tell your younger self?" another panelist asked. Damon was quiet for a long moment, and Amara could see him wrestling with something deeper than a prepared response. "I'd tell him that power without purpose is just noise," he said finally, "and that the people you dismiss on your way up are often the ones who could have made the climb worth something." After the panel, as attendees mingled and exchanged cards, Amara found herself watching Damon navigate conversations with activists and entrepreneurs who, months ago, would have been invisible to him. "You're different," she said when they found a quiet corner away from the crowd. "Different how?" "Present. Like you're actually listening instead of waiting for your turn to talk." "Maybe I'm finally hearing things worth listening to." Their eyes met, and that familiar electricity sparked between them. But before either could speak, a voice interrupted. "Amara, there you are." They turned to find David Chin, a civil rights attorney she'd worked with on several cases, approaching with his characteristic warm smile. "David, hi." She accepted his brief hug, aware of Damon watching the interaction with sudden intensity. "David, this is Damon Cross." "Damon, David Chin." The two men shook hands, sizing each other up with the particular tension that happens when two people recognize they're interested in the same woman. "Cross Enterprises," David said, his tone carefully neutral. "I've heard interesting things about your diversity initiative. I hope some of them were good. Some of them were surprising." David's smile was diplomatic but cool. "Amara's influence, I assume?" Damon's jaw tightened slightly. "Miss Cole has been educational. She has that effect." David turned back to Amara. Are we still on for dinner Thursday? That new Ethiopian place you wanted to try. Amara felt heat creep up her neck as she realized the situation she'd inadvertently created. Actually, I need to check my schedule. Of course. David's smile was understanding, but his eyes were curious as they flicked between her and Damon. Just let me know. After he walked away, the silence between Amara and Damon stretched uncomfortably. Friend of yours? Damon's voice was carefully casual. Colleague. We work together sometimes. Right. Work. She turned to face him fully. Are you jealous? I have no right to be jealous. That's not what I asked. He studied her face for a moment, then released a breath that sounded like surrender. Yes, he said simply. I'm jealous of a man who can ask you to dinner without it being complicated by the fact that he once dismissed you for your skin color. The honest vulnerability in his admission made her chest tighten. Damon. I should go. But he didn't move. Unless you want to get coffee and pretend this isn't the most complicated situation either of us has ever navigated. Despite everything, she smiled. Coffee sounds good. They walked to a small cafe 3 blocks away, the kind of place where mismatched chairs and local art created an atmosphere that had nothing to do with power or status. Damon looked comically out of place in his expensive suit, but he ordered his coffee without checking his phone once. A small miracle. Can I ask you something? Amara said as they settled into a corner table. Anything. Why are you really doing this? The panels, the diversity initiative, showing up at places where you clearly don't fit. He stirred his coffee slowly, gathering his thoughts. Do you remember what you said in your presentation? About companies missing out on the Sarahs of the world? She nodded. I've been thinking about all the Sarahs I've missed. All the brilliant people I dismissed or ignored or never even saw because I was so busy protecting what I thought was mine. And I realized I wasn't protecting anything worth keeping. He looked up at her. I was just perpetuating a system that made me feel powerful by making other people feel small. That's a significant realization. It's terrifying, he admitted, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And then you have to decide what you're going to do about it. What are you going to do about it? I'm trying to figure that out. With your help, if you'll let me. The request hung between them, loaded with implications that went far beyond professional collaboration. This is still complicated, she said softly. I know. My friends don't trust you. My family would have questions. David Chin thinks I'm losing my mind. Are you? She considered the question, thinking about the past few weeks, the late-night conversations, the cooking lesson, the way her pulse quickened every time his name appeared on her phone. Probably. His smile was soft, genuine. Good. Sanity is overrated. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching evening commuters hurry past the cafe windows. I should tell you something, Damon said suddenly. What? I've been showing up to places because I'm trying to understand your world. The work you do, the people you fight for, the changes you're trying to make. Why? Because I want to be worthy of being part of it. The admission was so quietly sincere that it made her breath catch. Damon. I know it's presumptuous. I know I have no right to assume you'd want me to be part of anything in your life. But the alternative is going back to who I was before I met you, and I can't do that anymore. Who were you before? He was quiet for so long she wondered if he would answer. Empty, he said finally. Successful, powerful, respected, and completely empty. I built an empire on making sure I never had to question whether I deserved what I had. And now I question everything. What I've built, how I built it, who I've hurt along the way. He met her eyes. Whether I deserve a second chance with the woman who showed me there was a better way to be. The words settled between them like a challenge and a promise. Second chances have to be earned, she said softly. I know. They require change that goes deeper than public appearances and diversity panels. I know. They require admitting that everything you thought you knew about yourself might be wrong. I know. His voice was steady, certain. I'm ready for that. She studied his face, looking for traces of the arrogant man who had dismissed her so cruelly. She found determination, vulnerability, hope, but no arrogance. Okay, she said finally. Okay. We'll see if you mean it. His smile was like sunrise, warm, genuine, full of possibility. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Transformation isn't comfortable. Nothing worth having ever is. As they walked back to her car, Damon's phone buzzed insistently. He glanced at it and sighed. Board meeting in 20 minutes. Emergency session about quarterly projections. Go, she said. Your empire needs you. My empire needs to learn to function without me hovering over every decision. The comment was casual, but it revealed something significant. A shift in how he viewed his role, his importance, his identity beyond corporate success. Text me later? He asked as she unlocked her car. Maybe. I'll take maybe. As she drove home, Amara found herself smiling despite all the logical reasons the situation was still impossible. Damon Cross was changing, and despite her best efforts to maintain professional distance, she was beginning to believe the transformation might be real. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tasha. Dinner tomorrow? Need updates on your billionaire situation. She typed back, it's complicated. The best love stories always are, came Tasha's immediate response. Love stories. Was that what this was becoming? Amara wasn't ready to answer that question. But for the first time since that day in the boardroom, she wasn't afraid of finding out. The Children's Hospital fundraiser was the kind of event where doing good came wrapped in designer gowns and tax-deductible generosity. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across marble floors while the city's elite wrote checks that would fund dreams and save lives. Amara had just finished delivering the keynote address about equitable healthcare access when she noticed the ripple of attention moving through the crowd. The kind of subtle shift that happened when someone truly important arrived. She didn't need to turn around to know Damon had entered the ballroom. She could feel his presence like electricity in the air, could sense his eyes searching for her among the sea of evening wear. Beautiful speech, came a voice beside her as she stepped down from the podium. Amara turned to find a woman who could have stepped from the pages of a society magazine. Silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, pearls that probably cost more than most people's cars, and a smile that was all surface with sharp depths underneath. Thank you, Amara replied cautiously. Eleanor Cross. The woman extended a perfectly manicured hand. Damon's mother. Every muscle in Amara's body tensed, but she kept her expression neutral as she accepted the handshake. Mrs. Cross. It's nice to meet you. Is it? Eleanor's smile never wavered, but her eyes were calculating, predatory. I've heard quite a lot about you, Miss Cole. Have you? Oh yes. My son has become quite vocal about his new interests lately. Eleanor's tone made interests sound like a communicable disease. Though I have to say I was expecting someone different. Different how? Eleanor's eyes swept over Amara deliberately, taking in her midnight blue dress, her natural hair styled in elegant curls, the confidence in her posture that couldn't be purchased or taught. More temporary, Eleanor said with surgical precision. The words were delivered with such casual cruelty that it took Amara's breath away for a moment. But she had dealt with Eleanor Cross's type before, women who wielded politeness like a weapon and smiled while drawing blood. I see, Amara said evenly. And what makes you think I'm temporary? Experience, dear. Eleanor moved closer, lowering her voice to an intimate whisper that somehow felt more threatening than shouting. You see, men like my son go through phases. They think they want something exotic, different from their usual social circle. But eventually reality sets in. Nearby guests were beginning to notice their conversation, drawn by the tension crackling between the two women despite their civil tones. And what reality is that? The reality that some divides simply cannot be bridged. Eleanor's smile was poison wrapped in politeness. Different backgrounds, different expectations, different appearances. Surely someone as intelligent as you can understand that this little fascination my son has developed will eventually run its course. Amara felt something dangerous and powerful rising in her chest. Not anger, anger was too small for this moment. This was the fury of every brilliant black woman who had ever been made to feel like an intruder in spaces she had earned the right to occupy. You know what's interesting, Mrs. Cross? Amara's voice remained perfectly controlled, but it carried a steel edge that made several nearby conversations pause. You assume I'm here for your son's approval. You assume I need your permission to exist in his world. Eleanor blinked, clearly not expecting pushback. But here's what you don't understand, Amara continued, taking a step closer. I don't need anyone's approval to be exactly where I belong. I didn't fight my way through Harvard Law, build a successful consulting practice, and earn a place on this stage tonight so that I could beg for acceptance from people who judge worth by bank accounts and bloodlines. The conversation around them had stopped entirely now. Other guests were pretending to admire auction items while obviously listening to every word. Your son isn't doing me a favor by choosing me, Amara's voice carried clearly across the sudden silence. I'm not a phase, I'm not temporary, and I'm certainly not exotic. I'm a woman who knows her worth, regardless of whether that makes you comfortable. Eleanor's composed mask was beginning to crack. You have no idea what you're dealing with? Don't I? Amara smiled, and there was nothing polite about it. I'm dealing with a woman so threatened by her son's growth that she's willing to embarrass herself publicly to protect a world built on exclusion. I'm dealing with someone so invested in maintaining the status quo that she can't see her son becoming a better man. How dare you? Ladies. The voice cut through the tension like a blade. Both women turned to see Damon approaching, his face a mask of controlled fury that was clearly not directed at Amara. Mother. His tone was arctic. I think there's been enough conversation for one evening. Eleanor straightened, attempting to regain her composure. Damon, darling, I was just getting acquainted with your friend. No. The single word carried more authority than most people managed in entire speeches. You were being unconscionably rude to the woman I love. The declaration landed like a thunderclap. Eleanor's eyes widened in shock, several guests gasped audibly, and Amara felt the world tilt on its axis. The woman I love. Damon, Eleanor started, her voice sharp with warning. If you cannot respect Amara, Damon continued, his voice carrying across the ballroom, then you don't respect me. And I will not stand for that. Not publicly, not privately, not ever. Cameras flashed. Phones appeared. The moment would be trending on social media within minutes. Eleanor looked between her son and Amara, her face cycling through shock, rage, and something that might have been fear. This is not over, she said quietly, but her voice shook. Yes, Damon replied firmly, it is. As Eleanor swept away, trailing wounded dignity and whispered conversations, Damon turned to Amara. His face was softer now, concerned. Are you okay? Amara was still processing the enormity of what had just happened. Not just his public defense of her, but his declaration. The woman I love. Did you mean it? She asked quietly. Every word. Even the part about. Especially that part. The ballroom around them seemed to fade away. Despite the stares, the cameras, the whispered conversations, there was only this moment. Damon looking at her like she was the only thing that mattered in a room full of people who had spent their lives mattering. We should probably leave, she said, suddenly aware of the attention focused on them. Together? The question held layers of meaning. Together meant facing whatever storm his public declaration would create. Together meant choosing each other despite the complications it would bring. Together, she confirmed. As they walked toward the exit, Amara's phone buzzed with a text from Tasha, who was watching from across the room. Girl, if you don't marry that man after he just declared war on high society for you, I will personally drag you to the altar myself. Despite everything, Amara smiled. In the car, as they drove through the city lights, Damon finally spoke. I should have stopped her sooner. You stopped her when it mattered. She had no right to speak to you like that. Amara turned to study his profile, noting the tension in his jaw, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel. This is going to cause problems for you, she said quietly. With your family, your social circle, your business relationships. Let it. Damon. No. He pulled over suddenly, putting the car in park so he could face her fully. I spent 34 years letting other people's expectations dictate my choices. I let my parents' prejudices become my prejudices. I let society's rules become my rules. I built an entire identity around maintaining a system that kept people like you out and people like me in. His voice cracked slightly. But you changed that. You changed me. And I would rather lose everything I built on that foundation than lose the man I'm becoming because of you. What if you lose it all? Then I'll build something better. Something worth having. He reached for her hands. With you if you'll have me. The words hung in the space between them, a promise and a question and a revolution all wrapped into one moment. This is going to get messy, she warned. The best things usually do. Your mother is going to make our lives difficult. My mother is going to have to learn that her son is no longer for sale. Amara looked at this man who had publicly chosen her over a lifetime of conditioning, who had declared war on his own world for the right to love her. Okay, she said finally. Okay. I'll have you. Mess and all. His kiss was fierce, desperate, full of promise and relief. When they broke apart, both were breathing unsteadily. I love you too, she whispered against his lips. Even after tonight's disaster? Especially after tonight. Damon, you can't be serious about these initiatives. Richard Blackstone, his longest-serving board member, slammed a folder onto the mahogany table. A $50 million diversity fund? Mandatory bias training for all executives? You're dismantling everything your father built. Damon straightened his tie, a gesture that used to feel like armor now felt like a noose. My father built an empire on exclusion. I'm trying to build something better. You're building a charity, not a corporation, another voice cut in. Our shareholders didn't invest in your guilty conscience. The words stung because they weren't entirely wrong. In the 3 months since he'd publicly defended Amara, since their relationship had become front-page news, since he'd announced sweeping changes to Cross Industries, his approval ratings had plummeted. Stock prices were volatile. Investors were nervous. But every morning when he saw Amara getting ready for her day, her hand unconsciously resting on her growing belly, their child safe beneath her heart, he knew he'd choose love over ledgers every single time. The meeting's adjourned, he said quietly. Damon. I said we're done. Later that week, he sat in his office as his assistant brought him the morning's newspapers. The headlines made his stomach clench. Damon Cross, love-struck or losing his mind? But it was the entertainment reporter's question from yesterday's press conference that echoed in his mind. She'd been young, eager, with kind eyes that reminded him of Amara. Mr. Cross, 6 months ago you were known for your, traditional hiring practices. What changed your mind about diversity and inclusion? He'd looked across the room to where Amara sat in the back, her hands folded over their growing child, her eyes full of quiet strength. The answer had come from somewhere deeper than his business training, somewhere raw and honest. I met someone who showed me that building walls doesn't make you strong. It makes you small. And I was tired of being small. The room had erupted in camera flashes, but all he'd seen was Amara's smile. Now, 48 hours later, that honesty was costing him everything. His phone buzzed. His assistant's voice was tight with controlled panic. Sir, the board has called an emergency meeting. They're voting. He didn't need to ask what they were voting on. He'd known this day would come from the moment he'd chosen love over legacy, truth over tradition. 2 hours later, he walked out of Cross Industries for the last time as CEO. The security guard who escorted him out was the same man who'd guarded these doors for 15 years, who'd nodded respectfully every morning as Damon arrived. I'm sorry, sir, the guard whispered as they reached the sidewalk. Don't be, Marcus. I'm not. And the strangest thing was, he meant it. The paparazzi were waiting like vultures, cameras flashing, questions screaming through the air. But Damon walked past them all, his shoulders straight, his head high. He'd lost his title, his corner office, his empire. He'd never felt more free. 20 minutes later, he stood outside Amara's nonprofit office. No tie this time. No entourage. No armor of authority. Just him in a simple button-down and jeans, holding his heart in his hands. She was at her desk, typing furiously, her pregnancy glow making her look like she was lit from within. When she looked up and saw him, her fingers stilled on the keyboard. I lost the company, he said without preamble. She studied his face, really studied it, taking in the absence of tension in his jaw, the way his shoulders no longer carried the weight of an empire he'd never wanted. Did you? She asked softly. He laughed, the sound surprising them both. It was the first real laugh he'd had in years, not the calculated chuckle of boardrooms, but something genuine and free. You lost the title, she continued, standing and moving toward him, but you gained something bigger. Yourself. When she reached him, she placed her hands on his chest, over his heart. This man right here? The one who chose love over legacy? This is who I fell for. I think I love you, he whispered, the words falling between them like a confession. Her smile was radiant. Took you long enough. 6 months later, Amara's nonprofit headquarters buzzed with energy. The converted warehouse downtown had been transformed into something magical. Exposed brick walls covered in murals painted by local artists, floor-to-ceiling windows flooding the space with golden light, and everywhere, the sound of hope being built one program at a time. Ladies and gentlemen, Amara's voice carried across the packed room, welcome to the grand opening of Elevate Foundation. The crowd erupted in applause. Business leaders, community activists, families, and young people filled every inch of the space. Amara stood at the makeshift podium, 8 months pregnant and absolutely glowing, her hand resting on her belly as she spoke. When I started this foundation, people told me I was too ambitious. They said a girl from the South Side couldn't change systems that had been in place for decades. Her voice grew stronger. But here we are with our first class of scholarship recipients, our mentorship program launching in 12 cities, and partnerships with companies who believe that diversity isn't just good for business, it's essential for humanity. The applause was thunderous, but Amara's eyes were scanning the crowd, looking for one face. Before we continue, she said, her voice softer now, I want to acknowledge someone who taught me that people can change. That love isn't just an emotion, it's a choice we make every day, even when it costs us everything. At the back of the room, heads began to turn. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Damon Cross stepped forward. Gone was the three-piece armor of corporate power. Instead, he wore simple dark jeans and a white button-down, his hair slightly mussed, his hands empty of everything except the love he carried for the woman on that stage. He walked through the crowd like he was walking through his own redemption story. People who had known him as the cold, calculating CEO watched in stunned silence as this man, vulnerable, human, transformed, made his way toward the stage. When he reached the front, he didn't stop. He didn't pause. He climbed the 3 steps to the stage and then, in front of everyone, business rivals, community leaders, reporters, and the woman who had changed his entire world, Damon Cross dropped to his knees. The room fell silent. Amara, his voice was broken, raw, carrying months of transformation and years of regret. I knelt before boardrooms and bank accounts my whole life. I worshipped money and power and everything that kept me small and cold and alone. His hands were shaking. But you showed me what was worth kneeling for. You showed me that love isn't about power. It's about surrender. It's about becoming who you're meant to be. Tears were streaming down faces throughout the crowd. Phones were recording, but for once, Damon didn't care about cameras or headlines or what the world would think. I'm begging you, he continued, his voice cracking with the weight of everything he'd never been taught to say. Please let me love you. Let me love our child. Let me spend every day for the rest of my life proving that some people really can change. The silence stretched for heartbeats that felt like eternities. Then Amara moved. She stepped down from the podium, her dress flowing around her, and knelt in front of him. The crowd gasped, but she only had eyes for the man whose world she'd turned upside down with love. Love isn't on your knees, Damon, she said, her voice carrying across the room. Love is what you choose every day, standing up. Standing up for what's right. Standing up for people who need your voice. Standing up for our family. She reached for his hands, helped him to his feet. But if you're going to kneel for anything, kneel for justice. Kneel for the people who need someone powerful to fight for them. Kneel for the changes we're going to make together. The crowd erupted. Applause, cheers, and tears filled the space as Damon and Amara stood together, her belly between them, their foreheads touching, their hands intertwined. Does that mean yes? He whispered, so only she could hear. It means I choose you too, she whispered back. Every day. Standing up. As they kissed on that stage, surrounded by everyone whose lives they were about to change, cameras flashed and captured the moment that would become legendary. Not because a CEO had fallen from grace, but because a man had found it. Sunday morning sunlight streamed through the windows of their brownstone, painting everything in gold. Amara sat cross-legged on the living room floor, their 18-month-old daughter Maya babbling happily on her lap, chubby fingers reaching for the colorful blocks scattered around them. Mama. Mama. Maya squealed, holding up a red block like it was the most important discovery in human history. Yes, baby, that's red, Amara laughed, pressing a kiss to the top of Maya's head. Just like the dress Mama wore when she met your daddy. From the kitchen doorway, Damon watched his entire universe exist in one perfect moment. Amara had her hair in a messy bun, wearing one of his old button-downs over leggings, and she had never looked more beautiful. Maya, with her mother's deep brown eyes and her father's stubborn chin, was the most perfect combination of both their worlds. You're staring again, Amara said without looking up, that knowing smile in her voice. Can't help it, he replied, moving into the room with 2 cups of coffee, hers with extra cream, the way she'd liked it since the pregnancy. Every morning I wake up thinking this might be a dream. He settled beside them on the floor, Maya immediately reaching for her father with excited babbles. Da. That's right, princess. He scooped her up, her giggles filling the room. Daddy's here. Amara curled against his side, her head on his shoulder, watching their daughter explore Damon's face with tiny, curious hands. Remember when you told me you didn't hire black women? Don't remind me, he groaned, but he was smiling. Worst business decision of my life. Best decision of mine, she countered, was walking into that boardroom anyway. Maya had discovered Damon's watch and was trying to eat it, her determination exactly like her mother's. She's going to change the world, Damon murmured, pure awe in his voice. She's going to have a better world to change, Amara corrected. Because of what we're building together. Through the window they could see the city where they'd both been broken and rebuilt. Where Amara had transformed from a rejected job applicant into the CEO of the most successful nonprofit in the state. Where Damon had gone from a cold corporate titan to a man who now spent his days using his business expertise to help minority-owned businesses thrive. The Elevate Foundation had expanded to 20 cities. Damon's consulting firm, built on everything Amara had taught him about authentic leadership, was changing corporate cultures one company at a time. Maya would grow up in a world where her parents hadn't just talked about change, they'd been it. "What are you thinking about?" Amara asked, noticing the distant look in his eyes. "My father," Damon admitted quietly. "He built towers that touched the sky. Thought that was legacy." Maya had fallen asleep against his chest, her tiny fist clutching his shirt, completely trusting and completely loved. "But it took losing those towers to realize my world was always meant to be built with you," he continued, pressing a kiss to Amara's temple. "This is legacy. This little girl who'll never know a world where love doesn't conquer hate. These mornings where I get to watch you be the most incredible mother and partner. The thousands of kids whose lives are different because you refuse to let one racist man keep you down." "We kept each other up," Amara corrected softly. "That's what love does." Outside, the city hummed with Sunday morning peace. Inside, a family built from the ashes of prejudice and the phoenix fire of genuine love planned their week over coffee and baby giggles. Damon Cross had once been a man who built walls to keep people out. Now he was a man who built bridges to bring them together. And every morning, when he woke up next to the woman who had seen past his armor to the heart he'd forgotten he had, when he heard his daughter's laughter echoing through rooms filled with love instead of loneliness, he knew he'd made the only choice that mattered. He'd chosen love. Every day. Standing up. And love had chosen him right back.